Hey everybody, welcome to Bookish, the virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, brought to you from the Southern California News Group and the Bay Area News Group. I'm Sam Dunn, the Senior Editor of Special Projects here at SCNG, and a book nerd and author myself. I want to say thank you to our Reader Reward subscribers and to all of you who've made our ongoing virtual programs so popular. By the way, if you're a Reader Rewards member attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift card from Barnes & Noble, which could come in really handy because you're about to get a lot of great book recommendations. So before we get started, there are a couple things to know. All of you as attendees are going to be muted to allow for the free flow of conversation among the panelists. But if you have questions or you want to add a comment, use the chat feature on the Zoom toolbar on your screen. We're going to be monitoring the questions and comments, and we're going to respond to as many as possible. This session will be videotaped, and a link will be sent to you so you can share it or revisit your favorite moments. It's also posted at scng.com/virtual events, where you can find all of our past virtual shows, as well as see what's coming up. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our Bookish host. She is a writer, performer, and radio commentator. Her work has been heard on NPR's Morning Edition and This American Life. She's a contributor at The Atlantic and host of the syndicated Radio Minute, The Lowdown on Science. Her many books include The Madwoman in the Volvo and her most recent book, The Madwoman and the Roomba. Beaming to us from very rainy Pasadena tonight, please welcome my friend Sandra Tsing Loh. Hello, Sandra.
Hello, it's good to see you. Okay, before we jump right in here, because it's a great hour, so exciting to kick off this new series of not lit up, but bookish. So please tell me, Samantha, we used to be lit up, now we're bookish. Why?
Well, let me explain. We have added our sister property, the Bay Area News Group.
Ooh.
So we've just expanded the bookish, the book loving brand and called it Bookish for both properties. So the more the merrier.
Well, I love it, and I love both titles, both bookish and lit up. I found in reading the books this week, and I think the $50 gift card will cover most of them, maybe Kindle editions. So that I found, like, when I'm reading, it's like everybody needs to go away. There's a lot of reading in bed in the pandemic. I say to my partner, go away, because I'm feeling bookish. And then, but of course, once I'm knee deep in the book, then I can't stop talking about it because I'm lit up. It was especially awkward, I'm going to say, with Denise Hamilton's book will be up first, Speculative Los Angeles, because when I was starting to talk about it, it was not making sense because they're interlinked, fantastic short stories. I go, it's Griffith Park, but it's a futuristic portal, and the immigrant mother sees a child, but it's not hers, and the TV producer has a dog that's not real, and then it's Jack Parsons of JPL. Demonic possession? Maybe yes, maybe no, because it's speculative.
Okay. You sound totally sane.
That's what happens when you get lit up. Okay, so I think, enough said. Why don't we just, as in the Great British Baking Show, Samantha, I'm going to say bye-bye. And let's bring on our first author for the evening, which is Denise Hamilton. I give you the 30-second download. Denise Hamilton is the best-selling author of 7 contemporary crime novels, including the Eve Diamond series, Damage Control, and The Last Embrace, set in 1949 Hollywood and inspired by the real-life disappearance of the starlet Jean Spangler. Denise is also the editor of the Edgar Award-winning Los Angeles noir short story anthologies. Prior to writing novels, Denise was a Los Angeles Times reporter and Fulbright scholar, and also wrote a monthly perfume column for the Los Angeles Times Magazine. Her new book that I've just mentioned is on screen is Speculative Los Angeles. It's a new anthology featuring original stories by 14 different authors, including, to name just a few, Amy Bender, Charles Yu, Alex Espinoza, Linnell George, and Francesca Leah Block, and there are more. Using each distinct neighborhood in Los Angeles as a launchpad, you'll encounter, see, I wasn't lying, 21st century changelings, giant mecha robots, battling on landfills, black holes and jacaranda men lurking in deep suburbia, beachfront property in Century City, walled off canyons and coastlines reserved for the wealthy, psychic death cults, robot nursemaids, and an alternate LA where Spanish land grants never gave way to urbanization. As Michael Connolly says, speculative Los Angeles is a thrill ride of grand ideas and warnings. Welcome, Denise.
It's so nice to see you.
Hello, in the parallel universe where you are. Where are you coming from? Where are you beaming from right now, Denise?
I'm beaming from not too far from you. I'm in Glendale.
Aha, but separated by the rain, could be in other universes entirely. Okay, so this book, it's a great read, by the way, of course. It begins with a quote from the great Eve Babbitt from LA Woman, where she says, everybody who really lived in LA was linked to the trans. So feeling a little bit like James Lipton in Inside the Actors Studio, I'm gonna go, Denise Hamilton, what is the trans?
Well, I think that anyone who lives here already has one foot in an alternate universe. This because of Hollywood, for starters. No one is who they seem. Everyone's fronting, everyone's pretending to be someone they're not, to be famous when they're not. You know, I mean, look at Angeline, you know, the posters. Not the posters, the
pink,
the billboards.
The pink convertible, yes.
Yeah, and so I think for starters, Hollywood just cast such a huge, crazy shadow on this place. And, you know, you can hear gunshots or you can see a car chase and you're not sure, okay, is this real or are they filming somewhere? And, you know, so I think that for starters, it's a place where you feel that almost anything can happen. It's on the edge of the continent. You know, the Pacific is just crashing up against us. Any moment we might get hit with the big one. And one of the short stories is actually about what happens in the aftermath of the big one that destroys most of LA and then allows this fascist corporate police state to kind of take over. That's Luis Rodriguez's story. And rebels are hiding out in the Angeles National Forest, trying to make a last stand. And Luis is a poet laureate of LA, and he's just a great guy. The thing, I wanted a quote that was from someone who was really associated with Los Angeles. And I think what I found was that was the best quote that I could find, because LA is like a trance. So I just thought that was a really great way to open it.
Yeah, and I know.
Plus, I love Eve Babbitt. I love her
also,
work.
yeah, Stephen Blackmore said, LA isn't a city that grows, it's a city that swallows, bloating ever fatter of the neighbors it subsumes. So it's a great noir and also speculative place for fiction to come from. And I think that you've also dedicated the book to Octavia Butler, who we definitely have discussed on this series thus far. So how does she resonate for you and for this book?
Yeah, she's just amazing. I mean, I think everyone should read Parable of the Sower, which is set in Altadena, and then it's set along the Interstate 5. And it's set in the future when bad things are happening and crazy drugs have taken over and everybody lives in these walled off communities, and there is a dictator president whose slogan is "Make America Great Again." But it was written, 20 years ago. Octavia Butler has thankfully become very prominent today, more so than she ever was in her life. She did win a MacArthur Genius Grant, and she was championed by Harlan Ellison, another famous sci-fi writer who lived and worked in LA and Hollywood. But it's just so great to see her get the recognition she deserves. And Linnell George, who's one of the contributors to Speculative Los Angeles, actually wrote a book about Octavia Butler and her writing. It's a nonfiction book. And so I just thought
yes, we've also featured. So
Linnell, yeah, Linnell's great. Linnell's great. So I totally wanted her to write a story for this collection, and she did. And it's, maybe she was a little bit inspired by Octavia Butler, but it's definitely her work and her plot and everything. So I just felt that I wanted to a nod to our homegrown, wonderful female African-American sci-fi writer.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more note on multiculturalism, if we could say. Your bio describes you as a noir and sci-fi fantasy geek and proud LA native who refuses to speak only in English. So LA native, okay, can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, I grew up as a child speaking French. My mother was Russian and French, and she had come here after World War II. And we used to speak French at home. And then I don't even know really when I learned English, but then I, also studied Russian, and I speak Spanish. And I was just so offended by, a lot of the videos online where people are being screamed at to speak in English in the last 4 years. And I think everyone should speak more than one language, and no one should legislate what language you speak. So I think that was, and LA is certainly a city that has, probably 187 different languages that are spoken, which I just love, And the other thing LA has, which relates back to speculative LA, is we have all the ghosts and myths and gods and demons and all the archetypes and stories from 187 different cultures, some of which are presented here in the collection. And so LA is just such a rich place for any kind of fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction. And one thing I wanted the collection to do was really to reflect the diversity and richness of LA, especially since sci-fi has traditionally been such a male, white, oriented genre. So it's nice to see it become more diverse.
No, absolutely. And I think to the experience of reading the book, sometimes people can get a prejudgment before they read. Like, I know for me, sometimes I'm scared of sci-fi or paranormal fiction because I go, I don't understand robots and it won't make sense. And but I found starting to read this book, I think, the very first story by Lisa Morton, your slug line, just for, viewers to get a taste of what it would be, like an agricultural realm called Rancho Los Feliz thrives and prospers, and this is in the 1950s, thanks to the oversight of its managers, a Latina and a Native American woman. What could go wrong? But their Garden of Eden changes forever when a horribly burned man carrying a high-tech weapon staggers out of an oak grove. I mean, it's so readable. It reminded me of when I was in junior high reading Ray Bradbury's The Illustrated Man for the first time. It is just human characters, understandable human characters in a normal situation, but then it becomes surreal, or is it? And I think that for some reason, reading these stories, instead of fearing it, it was so readable and enjoyable and relatable. And I wonder if maybe even in these, and I'm usually somebody who reads very just realistic stuff. In these times, I mean, in these pandemic times that are so surreal, if you told me a prehistoric goddess unleashed a disease in the form of a monkey god in an ancient state, I would go, that makes sense. I mean, do you feel there's some special way that we read this kind of book in these crazy times? It just seems so normal.
Yeah, I think speculative fiction and sci-fi, fantasy, however you want to call it, and it is kind of an umbrella term that we chose for it, speculative Los Angeles. I think people are dying to escape their living rooms or their essential worker jobs, and kind of perhaps wishing that we had been able to experience a different timeline where maybe the virus didn't spread, or a cure was found faster, or it wasn't as fatal, or aspirin cured it, or so many different alternate paths that might have happened. You realize, even just looking back on this year, all these points at which things might have been different. And so I think that's what fantasy and speculative fiction asks that question is, what if? What if things were different? What if there were parallel LAs, parallel dimensions, parallel universes? And I love Lisa Morton's story because, I run a lot up in Griffith Park on those trails. And, as I run, I'm like, oh, was that the oak grove that the guy staggered from the future, or from a parallel LA? And I think some of us think, oh, wow, what if LA and California had not industrialized? And what if it was still bucolic and agricultural, and there were ranchos, but there was more equity, right? That the missions were not enslaving African Americans, not African Americans, Native Americans, and that things had evolved differently. And so you think, okay, that's a starting point that I'm willing to go with Lisa on and see what happens. So, and I love the fact that it's two women of color who are running this giant rancho spread, and it's the brother of one of the women who's kind of scheming because he thinks by all rights that he should have been the one who got control of the rancho, and instead it's two women and they work together. So that story just haunted me, and it just felt so right when I read it. I was like, yes, this is going to open the collection.
Yeah, and I think that it goes from that and then to an immigrant mother with her toddler that's returned after gone through an ICE experience, and then she thinks the child is a changeling. And then you get to a Hollywood story, and it's so interesting that instead of a Hollywood story opening it, it becomes another kind of its own weird tribe is Hollywood, where you go, this guy behaves so strangely, and it's like, and so I think that it is. Just by not centralizing sort of a white male narrative, it really is a great read and makes everything look fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I was really trying for that. And I wanted the cacophony of voices to kind of drown out any kind of preconceptions that people might have about what speculative fiction or sci-fi in LA would read like. And so I think that we certainly tried to do that. Also, somebody asked me, oh, well, everybody must have wanted to write about Hollywood, like, a futuristic or a speculative story set in Hollywood. And I was like, actually, no. Dwayne said, he said, well, it's probably everyone's wanted to pick Hollywood already. I said, no, actually, you're the first one, because half the stories were assigned already. I said, yeah, so go for it. Because I think that Hollywood stories have been so overexposed and overdone that I think it's very hard, like you said, to find something fresh about it. And I think that the two stories that deal peripherally with Hollywood, and one is really a critique, a very barbed social critique of celebrity. That's Dwayne's story. I think they approached it kind of from a slant, and from kind of a sideways perspective. And it wasn't your typical, screenwriter, it wasn't Barton Fink. And I love Barton Fink, but what I was looking for was really fresh takes, and that's thankfully what I got.
That's totally what you have. And Eileen Ferris just said she really enjoyed speculative fiction. Occasionally we see these chat things come up. I'll shout them out as they come. So anyway, it is a fantastic collection. Thank you so much for being with us, Denise, the great Denise Hamilton. Her newest project, Speculative Los Angeles, is available now from Akashic Books. Get it. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you. See you later.
All right. Next up, we have Leslie Lehr, the 30-second download, as we like to call it. Leslie Lehr's lifelong passion has been exploring the challenges facing contemporary women. An award-winning novelist and nonfiction writer, Lehr's books include What a Mother Knows, Wife Goes On, 66 Laps, Nonfiction, Welcome to Club Mom, Club Grandma, and Nesting. Her personal essays have appeared in the New York Times Modern Love column, narrated by Katie Couric on NPR, HuffPost, and the anthologies Mommy Wars, Honeymoon's Over, and on Becoming Fearless. She wrote the original screenplay for the romantic thriller Heartless and the comedy drama club Divorce for Lifetime. Lehr's newest book, a memoir, and the first project since her breast cancer treatment, is A Boob's Life, How America's Obsession Shaped Me and You. Already, it has made the best book lists of Glamour, Good Morning America lists, and People, and now pretty impressive, Salma Hayek is making it into a TV series for HBO Max. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you and your boobs,
The boobs are us.
And I'm immediately going, and I'm wearing the wrong bra, but I feel great about it.
I think COVID killed the bra.
Yeah, I own myself. So which is part of the message of your book. Okay, so can you just jump in and tell us the moment that you decided you had to write this book?
Oh, of course, it was this miracle of inspiration after breast cancer. I actually didn't know if I'd write another book. It took me a long time to get that creative spark back, years. And I got out of the shower one night, and it was supposed to be a date night, kind of our first time after I was completely recovered. We were in a new place, we were unpacking, and I got out of the shower and my boobs were crooked. And I was so upset. And I knew I should just be grateful to be alive. But I was, of course I was, but I was so mad after all I'd been through, not just in the last couple of years, but my entire life. You know, a woman's life, you go through all these stages, which I can go into, but I was so upset. It's like date night was off. My husband said, chill out. We sat down and we started watching Letterman on TV. It was like his big swan song. He's the smart guy. And he told a boob joke. And I got even more mad. So forget date night completely. My husband accused me of being obsessed with boobs, and I am a feminist. No way could I be obsessed with boobs, right? So I just, you know, he went to bed. I went into the other room, called my doctor to fix my breasts. And then I'm like, wait a minute, are they broken? Why do I feel this way? So I wanted to prove to him that, okay, maybe I'm obsessed. Clearly I'm not the only one, but I wanted to know why. And I couldn't find anything else that traced a woman's entire life over the period of her breasts. And I started looking at scrapbooks, and I realized my life paralleled this incredible obsession in America from television and Playboy and, you know, advertising and all this stuff. Really, it was the only way. I had to write this book. I knew the title that night, and I had to use my life as an example to show a woman's life through the lens of our breasts and our culture. And it was just to prove my husband was I had an excuse. It wasn't just me. It wasn't my fault. You know,
That's where it starts, with a husband, but it does not end there. But I think, to go back a minute, you're talking about like feminism and boobs. And I think one thing that I am 59, I was born in 62. So I especially just loved your journey. It's a very moving personal journey, but also it's the backdrop is this cultural history in America. And I think that the feminism of the 60s, I mean, boobs, it was really not clear like what we were supposed to do about our boobs. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, we, you know, because Playboy started, it was in the universities, and formula was made. So people like my mother, who was a women's liberation person, got her PhD, but didn't breastfeed. And so, you know, the need to be curvy, breasts were no longer for babies. They were for pulling eyeballs to television screens. It turns out that men's are attracted to look at a woman's chest within 200 milliseconds of her entering the room. Now that's biology. We can't fight that. But, you know, the culture really co-opted that to make a lot of money. And in the 60s, then it became political of whether you're wearing a bra or not. And by the 80s, you know, the FDA, thanks to the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, said that small breasts were a disease. So you'll see this rise of large breasts that were really for men's entertainment. And of course, we want to be beautiful. We live in the culture. We're all part of this deal. But in a woman's life, we all start as little girls wanting to be women, wanting to wear a bra, you know, budding these breasts. And I grew up in the Midwest, so it was all cheerleaders and you know, beauty queens, and they all had beauty. That was a part of the deal, right? So then you finally start growing, and then you hide your breasts to work and have jobs, and then you show them to date. And then if you have children, you breastfeed with them and you actually create life. I mean, they are an organ because they make blood into milk, yet there's no medical specialty for them. And they are this life-giving thing. And then they get huge, which I was really thrilled about, because finally I had really nice boobs, right? And then of course they're deflated. And my mom actually thought I was like deformed. She had never seen anything like it. Years later, by the time I got divorced, she actually encouraged me and wanted and paid for it eventually when I had a moment of weakness. Then I got implants, because she thought I would be lonely. How could I be beautiful without breasts? And I was like, no, I'm an intellectual feminist. I'm not going to do that. But when I finally did it, it actually did make me feel womanly. I mean, because that's what we see in, you know, American Hollywood influences the world. And then I got breast cancer. No relation. I mean, breast implants are the most popular elective surgery in the country. 300,000 women a year get them. It's insidious. But then breast cancer, weirdly, the same number of women every year are diagnosed. And I came so close to dying. It was really lucky that I am here. And so I had to really figure out how I was, my whole life I could see by my breasts, and no one had really looked at that before.
I mean, you've said so many interesting things in one block. So just to go back for a moment, I know that you say like for working women, it's kind of like they're working and they're pumping, they're having it all. No, they're they're just leading themselves further and further.
Right. And also people are being shamed if they're not. So it's like, we can't win or lose. I just want people to be judgment free. Stop judging ourselves, stop judging other women.
Right. And then to go back a little bit before where you are now. And I think I just wanted you, if you would, to touch on a couple of cultural touchstones for me as a child of the 60s and 70s. I just loved reading, for instance, Marlo Thomas.
Oh my gosh.
What her significance was in the boob journey?
Of course. Well, I mean, as a little girl, for me, I wanted boobs because I wanted to wear a bra. That meant I was grown up. And then, but suddenly women were not wearing bras. That Miss America protests where they actually threw away bras, they didn't burn them. But it was to be free of the patriarchy and against the war. And, on TV, Hooterville and all these women who were big breasted, Marlo Thomas, and that girl, not only was she single, but she was engaged because that was a safer way. But she was the first woman on TV to not wear a bra. She wasn't that big breasted. My mom said, oh yeah, that's why. But she said, who needs a bra? And so it was a real thing of, she was a good girl who didn't wear a bra. And it wasn't as political as just being a woman who had rights to her own body. So she was really amazing. I mean, she's a real icon and was definitely part of the zeitgeist because people were shocked that she talked about it in a women's magazine. I think it was Good Housekeeping or some real, stay-at-home mom kind of magazine. And she was a liberated woman on TV, not wearing a bra. It was pretty shocking.
So, and I think also, I mean, Woodstock, also your take on Woodstock was really interesting for me. And I think it was a fresh take.
Yeah, no one's ever asked me about that, but I really felt like Woodstock, we have these memories, and of course it's been co-opted by advertising. We think, oh, how groovy it was, all the commercials, we think back, and it was so free. But when we look at the iconic images, it's always women who are bare-chested, and these are movies made by men. All the pictures were made by men, and there are no accounts of any women who were there because there was no laws against sexual harassment. You couldn't be a woman there and not take your top off or wear a bra. It wasn't like freedom. There was a lot of peer pressure there. So for me, for Woodstock, I think it was just the same kind of double bind for women, probably, that, not being there was. So it's a really interesting thing to look back at. And there's not really any credible sources except for women who went with boys or went with their husbands who were protected. So it was,
And I think, I mean, your book it's like, it's not predictable where it goes. It's really it's a thoughtful journey. And I think your mother is such an amazing character, and your dialogues with your mother, if you can just paint that a little bit, like how you disagree about pageants, about beauty pageants, and then about heft. I was like, can you just tell a little bit about her take on it?
Well, my mother worked with Planned Parenthood. She was a professor. She got her PhD when I grew up. And yet she also posed for my dad, on the couch. And then he was a Playboy guy and left and, did the thing that men do then. But she really values smart as well as pretty. But she so was part of the culture who thought, oh, beauty pageants really give women an opportunity for education. And if you look at the numbers, one person wins, right? And all the other women, I mean, that's just all this controversy. And even when Heft died and was buried next to Marilyn Monroe, who has no idea, and he used her cheap photograph to make a lot of money. And, we're now seeing the culture say, oh, maybe he wasn't that good of a guy, but it's like, oh, he gave all these women an opportunity to make money and be pretty. But it's like, what other opportunity did they have to make money? And they had to strip to do it, and it influenced this culture of topless women and women having to strip in TV. And then, we have, what's his name during the Oscars saying, I saw your boobs. And it's like, how is that? Is that funny? I don't know if that's funny. If so, when you put all these things together, and she, is kind of changing her mind. She's a very smart woman. And yet when we're raised to have this idea of what beauty is, it's tricky business. And there's not a right answer really, because we're all part of the situation. We all need to be beautiful and feel good about ourselves. And we're all part of the culture, even the men.
So, and of your many fans, I just want to give a shout out. Rita Zipnick says, bless you. Just like And, you know, I think finally the question is, you talk about duality for today's women to navigate a new path
Yes.
between sexy and sacred.
Well, this to me has a lot to do with censorship, because, you know, we can show sex, well, two things. One thing's like under boob is okay, top of the boob is okay. Nipples not okay. I mean, breastfeeding was only legalized about 18 months ago for the whole country. And yet if you have a nip slip, it's, you know, you can get arrested for showing too much. And even on TV, they can slash a breast, but you can't show the nipple. And it's just a really, that's a really tricky thing. And women were either, you know, the Madonna whore thing, it sounds really cliche, that dude Freud, you know, had us like that, but women aren't one thing or the other. It's very hard to be sexual. We're all so much more complex, and we can be, you know, we're mothers and we can be sexy, and the culture is not really ready for that. It's easier to divide us. And when they divide us, of course, then women have less power. So for me, it's just an easy either or kind of situation. And we, you know, we need to work together so that, I mean, for me, it's all about self-care so we live and don't get cancer, childcare. And if we make more money, you know, during COVID right now, it's this whole situation where women, we can see we're at home doing everything because we don't make as much money, because we don't have childcare. And it's not even just having the guys help. It's like everybody needs to have the opportunity to make the same money and to have childcare, so the best brains are working and we can all make these choices on our own. And it does come down to the fact that we have breasts and we feed our children, and it's the most obvious, you know, and it's controversial, but even with the gender issues, the first thing that many trans people who are switching sexes physically will get top surgery, or they will get rid of their breasts. You know, women who have breast surgery, I know a woman who spent 2 years of surgeries just to get breasts back, you know, just to feel womanly and to have that feeling of being a woman. I mean, breasts are a big deal. And if you look up, the reason I didn't call it, you know, breast life is because that sounds so scientific. If you look on the computer, if you Google breasts, it's breastfeeding, breast implants, breast cancer, chicken recipes. But if you Google boobs, it's mostly porn. And it's so, all the names, there's over 150 nicknames, you know, that I found just alone to put in the book, you know, and all the boob
And I note
jokes.
on that, and that is so funny, those nicknames, that when I was reading it, it's like, I go, this could be a Vagina Monologues, another groundbreaking hit, hilarious play.
I have a book trailer actually coming out, and Carolyn Ria's doing the voice, and it's all about that, you know, and then, but then we have to conform into, this is like, you know, the 50s pinup thing. It's like, this is how breasts are supposed to be. They're this object that's part of us. And isn't it funny? I just noticed today that a lot of nicknames are for food, you know, or ammunition. So breasts are very powerful. And I think we need to take ownership of them and be less judgment, you know, with ourselves and others. There's nothing we can do. We are part of our life. If we want to make ourselves look better, that's great. But I think if we can be aware of how we are treated because of our breasts, and how every day you and I get up in the morning after decide what kind of bra we're going to put on, or no bra, or show them or hide them. Or, I mean, it is a part of our lives. And if people who say, oh, I don't care, it's like, you can say you don't care, but the culture cares. So just be in denial. No, it's part of how we live. And I'm just trying to raise awareness, and hopefully the book and the TV series that Salma Hayek is making, it's a comedy. My Boobs Are Gonna Talk. You know, she does have a funny a part in it, and she's just brilliant. She and Dolly Parton, I mean, they are using their boob power for good. They know that the boobs attract the eyeballs, and then they have the power to produce incredible films like Frida, to give money to COVID relief. You know, I mean, that's, if you got it, you might as well take advantage of it, because you can't fight biology. We just have to be aware of the culture.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie Lehr. What an inspiration. I feel good. I just kind of like, yeah, the boobs are I'm excited.
And take care of yourself. Don't get stressed out. We need everybody to just, you know, not get sick.
Excited for the TV show, but first and foremost, the book is out now. A Boob's Life. Everyone should get it. It's available right now. So thank you so much, Leslie Lehr. And stay healthy and gorgeous and as smart as a cat.
Thank you, Sandra.
All righty. Thank you, Leslie.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. All right. Our final guest tonight is Walter Mosley. Now, for those, okay, he is an American treasure of several decades. If you don't know, I will give you the 30-second download. Author of over 60 books across multiple genres, Walter Mosley is one of America's greatest crime fiction writers. His best-selling historical mystery series stars Easy, short for Ezekiel Rollins, a black PI living in LA's Watts neighborhood, then called Watts. It debuted in 1990 with Devil in a Blue Dress, made into a movie starring Denzel Washington and Jennifer Beal. He has many honors, include the PEN America's Lifetime Achievement Award, Mystery Writers of America Grand Master Award, an O. Henry Award, multiple NAACP awards, and a Grammy. In 2020, he received the National Book Foundation Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters, making him the first Black man to receive that honor. TV credits, including writing and producing on John Singleton's FX crime drama Snowfall with Apple TV. He's adapting his novel The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray, starring Samuel Jackson. A busy man. He was actually double booked, triple booked, and so we recorded this interview 3 hours ago. And so here he is, Walter Mosley. Walter Mosley, thanks so much for being here. Okay, to begin with, the Easy Rollins series turns 31 this year.
Yeah.
Age. Unbelievable. And Blood Grove, just out, which I believe is your 15th and most recent novel in the series. It's as fresh as if it were a first book. This was a sit down in one read.
Thank you.
So I guess there's a two-part question for your audience. So you have so much complexity you can hold in your mind. One was, what was the original inspiration for Easy Rollins back in the day, if you can take us back to that time? And the second is, why is it still so fun for you to write him today?
Well, the first, how I started writing about Easy. I didn't start writing about Easy as a mystery or anything. I was writing short stories, and I was, picking characters out of the South, out of stories that my father had told me from Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas. And I was writing a story. I decided to write a story about a rent party. And, rent party is like, everybody pays a nickel, and, and you add all that money up, and you buy the beer and you buy the liquor, and you make some, food, and people come, and they give you enough money to pay for all that and to pay the rent. And it was a first person narrative, and the guy is talking, and he's talking about, giving a party and doing.
Walter Mosley, thanks so much for being here. Okay.
And what life was like in Fifth Ward. And so, yeah, that I knew from my father. Yeah.
Right. Leroy. Right. So, right. So 30 something years later. So what has something changed in the way that you write this character, or the way that you see him, or what continues to call to you about?
Well, there are two things or three things that change. One, I change. I'm getting older. I think in different ways. I have maybe some different issues, conscious or unconscious. Second thing is, every Easy Rollins book is that much more in the future, either a year or 5 years or whatever. And another thing, Easy gets old. So, now Easy's almost 50. So there's no way in the world Easy's going to get into a fight. You know what I mean? He can, but he's going to lose, and that's what he thinks from the very beginning. He says, well, listen, if you match your strength with anybody else, you're always going to lose. But if you go to the left, or you go to the right, you got a chance. And, so I think that all of that, and with Easy, there's also a great deal of change in his friends. And this is true for some people. It's not true for others. Some people, are very happy just living the same life they always lived. But some people, artists a lot, and people who are really, kind of pressing themselves to be different, they have different influences from their friends. So, Mouse is reading books, and he's reading serious books. He's not just reading, Mickey Spillane or something. He's like reading some serious stuff. And Jackson Blue almost has a semblance of courage. And he really is one of the smartest and most successful businessmen in America, working, with the French, billionaire. And so, and Mouse, not only is he reading, he has a girlfriend who's a Viet Cong mechanic. I mean, it's like things are really changing. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. So speaking of the Vietnamese mechanic, okay. So one thing is you're Los Angeles, and Ezekiel Rollins is Los Angeles. Is multicultural in not just lip service. It really is, and around every corner, it's so these characters are so great. So I mean, there's Easy and his friends, but also the city of Los Angeles. You know, the sense of place. To what extent do you find Los Angeles is like the perfect place for Easy to be easy?
Well, I think for so many American crime novelists, you know, it's LA. I mean, sometimes, you know, New York has a good little amount of it, and then, you know, less, you know, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, you know, because, you know, as more and more mystery writers are writing, you know, they mark out their territory. But Los Angeles is such a great place. It changes so much and so quickly, you know, that you know, it's you know, extraordinary. I mean, I think it's wonderful. I want to make sure that I say it right. That most cities are the same. New York, for instance, has the same population, 7.2 to 8 million people. That's who lives in the city. Los Angeles has grown 100,000 people in population every year since 1945. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more spread out and less cohesive in many ways, you know. And it's a place for a criminal to go. It's a place for a criminal to act. You know, I mean, there are other cities that are good for it. Miami's good for it, but it's really kind of I find it extraordinarily interesting, and Easy's you know, just attachment to it, I think, is wonderful.
So, you know, okay, so Ezekiel Rollins is Black, and you are thought of by many, obviously, as a Black writer, but I guess maybe not as many people know that while your father, Leroy, was a Black man from Louisiana, I believe, your mother, Ella, was Jewish and of Russian ancestry. So, you know, and the legend has it at City College in Harlem, a writing mentor of yours, the great Irish novelist and playwright, Edna O'Brien, said, "You're Black, Jewish, with a poor upbringing. Their riches within." So, and of course, then it says, like, at certain points, you know, you were considered a Jewish writer, maybe, or maybe a Black writer, but you were so successful, sold so many books, maybe not. I mean, so, I mean, I would say, do you consider yourself a Black writer, a Jewish writer, or do these questions even have any relevance?
Well, to begin with Edna was really, in many ways, my most important teacher. I just loved her. She's so brilliant. I think she's the greatest still living writer in the English language. And she did say that to me, but, you know, I already knew that I was Black and Jewish, and, you know, was raised inside those cultures. I mean, I didn't need her to tell me that, but Edna one day told me, she went, "Walter, write a novel." And I just went, "Hey, you know, okay, I'm gonna go write a novel." And I think that's her biggest impact on me. She doesn't know it, but that's, you know, that's what I felt and what I knew. You know, I'm Black. I'm Jewish. You know, my mother's Jewish. That makes me Jewish. I'm Black because I live in America, and, you know, that makes me Black. And so, you know, I am a Jewish writer. I am a Black writer. You know. My stories are mostly about Black people in America because, you know, that's, you know, the majority of the weight of an identity placed on me by the larger culture. I don't mind that at all, by the by. I like my identity. And I like writing about Easy and Mouse and Leonid McGill and Socrates, Fortlow and Fearless Jones, and, you know, and then all the kind of one-off novels that I write, and all those characters. That's great.
And I mean, and she said, write a novel. And I think the word novel sort of has a special resonance for you. You prefer to call yourself a novelist. And what for you, as opposed to writing a short story, what do novels do that short stories don't? What's about the novel?
Well, you know, I mean, the book just before the Ezekiel Rollins novel was a collection of short stories, The Awkward Black Man. And I like writing short stories. And often I'll write about a character in connected short stories. Though The Awkward Black Man was different. They're all different stories. or almost all. And, I like being a novelist. And I also find that, novels are the easiest of all the things to write. Novels are probably the easiest thing to write. Ian Forster says in Aspects of the Novel, a novel is 50,000 words, more or less, of spongy prose. And it's it's a wonderful thought. You're writing, like if you're writing a short story, if you're writing a poem and a woman is wearing a red dress, as you are, and she walks in, there has to be a reason for wearing that red dress. If you're writing a novel and it's chapter 16 and a character walks in wearing something red, well, they're just wearing something red. It could mean something, but it doesn't have to mean anything. There's an easier pace to a novel, and there's more time to work out things. If you're writing a sonnet, you have 14 lines. Every word better mean 20 different things. If you're writing a short story, I always look at a novel is like a mountain that you look at from afar. You can never really get to it or get away from it, but it's there. But everything is there. A short story is a mountain, but it's in the ocean, and only the very top of it shows the island at the top of the mountain, and that's the short story. So all this other stuff has to go unexplored and not talked about, but still it has an extraordinary impact on whatever story is happening on that little island,
Well, I don't know. I think that your details are really specific. And I was just thinking the character of Milo, whereas going back, who wears a tie-dye t-shirt, threadbare jeans. I think that it is not always an accident of what people are. You can kind of connect.
No, it's not. There often it does mean something, but not every word you're writing. Like, yeah, you can just sing it, go off a little bit and talk about what the environments look like in the Blood Orange Grove, for instance. And, it's not necessarily connecting with something in the plot, which is easy because you can misdirect people because they might think it's something important and it becomes not, but it's not really a red herring because, it's just this big thing that you're writing. I mean, it's really lots of fun. I love writing.
That car.
But I like writing everything. I like writing short stories. I even write a poem now and then.
Yeah, and I think you've talked about your desire, Jewish, Black, to write Black male heroes. That nobody in America has really, not many people have written about those women. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about the Black male hero, and what do you think is the context and the problem and the challenge of writing one?
Well, I really, it's kind of the joy of writing them. I think that, to have lived, born in Watts, raised in South Central Los Angeles, around all of these extraordinary, wonderful, brilliant, interesting Black people. And to realize that nobody's ever written stories about so many of them, so many of the different, people. I remember a long time ago, I was writing an Ezekiel Rollins, and a guy, Black guy, owned a bar. Easy was there, and the guy only played classical music. He would not play, R&B, blues, jazz. None of that stuff. He played classical music, and he said, "If you don't like my music, don't drink in my bar. That's all right. It's fine with me." And it's just, the idea that you can, you explore, so easily. I think. New worlds that are actually well-trodden worlds that Black characters can enjoy. The Christmas Black, Easy's friend. He comes from a family that have been soldiers since the American Revolution. It's Black people, but there's a kind of a connection to the army that Christmas and his family has. And there's also a breaking point that somebody else might not have. They'll say, well, they won't think they're wrong for an action that they've taken. Whereas this Black, man who's been in an army, in the army forever, and a family that's been in the army forever, finally at some moment says, I can't do this anymore. I have to leave. It's really interesting. And of course, Easy, I mean, or Leonid McGill for that matter in New York. I mean, these characters, they're so interesting, and almost everything they do takes on a different color. Excuse the pun, because they come from a place that's so different, but they live a life that's so similar.
Right. I mean, and there's so many great ways. You said one of the great things about Ezekiel Rollins says about being a Black PI in the late 60s was that before that, most people saw you as, and before that was that most people saw you as poor. That way they could offer you what sounded like a great deal of money, confident that you sell your soul for it, where he's just using that as another of his tools in his weapon kit, which is so fantastic.
And also Easy, I mean, this is not just true of Easy, though. It's very rare, at least historically, it's very rarely been done in mystery fiction. I mean, I haven't read all the new fiction. There's so many people who write, but it's very rare that people use poverty as an education of being a private detective. Is that, my poverty, I've been my characters will say, I've been a survivor since I was 8 years old. I know when there's trouble. I know when there's something wrong. I know when things are too quiet. I know when they're too loud. I know, and that's easy. He knows these things, and he always, he depends on it. Same with Mouse. I mean, who's, professional heist man, but he does the same kind of thing.
Okay, you've been really generous as a great American icon, also as an educator and helper to people who are aspiring writers. So I'm going to pivot to that for a moment. This year you write your novel, followed by elements of fiction, and now you also have a masterclass. So there's many interesting things that you say about writing. And one of the things that you've said is, I'm paraphrasing, the great thing about starting to write at age 34, which was the age you were writing, I think you were working for Mobil Oil and decided to write. The great thing about starting to write at age 34 was that you were already a failure in life.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you mean with that?
I think that, well, I was, I was a hippie for a long time, hitchhiking back and forth. And I went to a college or two that I didn't finish. And finally I got a degree, which, was kind of nice. And I lived a really interesting life. And, but I wasn't successful at anything. I mean, I got a degree, but there was nothing I could do with it. I went to graduate school, but I wasn't really interested in it. I was a computer programmer for 15, 16 years. And that was something, and I in my eyes, also in my father's, that he goes, Walter, when are you ever going to do anything? And I go, well, I'm just living my life, Dad. I mean, I'm having fun. I haven't saved any money. I didn't buy a house. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. But I didn't care. But I did think I was a failure. And so then when I started to write and I became so successful as a writer, I was a success as a writer. But the feeling of failure, the stink of failure, whatever you call it, has stayed with me all that time.
Interesting. Okay, so one quick question is, there's that first line that you wrote. It seems you were sitting in your office at work, right? And you write a sentence, and that is your first sentence as a writer. Can you say what that was?
Oh, no, yeah. And really, it never became anything. But on hot, sticky days in southern Louisiana, the fire ants swarmed. And yet, that is such a, it could begin with as simple as that, sentence like that. So you have a routine, though. And I think that many of the people who watch this program, they're fans of yours. And also there's a little bit, in their hearts of like, maybe I could write a novel. And you said, this year you write your novel. And you said, you suggested something of a daily routine. So can you say what your writing routine is? Well, I mean, my writing, I feel that this would work for most writers. Maybe like 99% of them. Didn't work for Georges Simenon, but that's a different thing. If I wake up every day, and the first thing I do, the clearest my mind is I write, and then I write for 3 hours, never any more than that. And that, I think, is the most important part of any writer's life. If you can write every day, if you just come to it, and I look at it the way Freud looked at psychoanalysis so long ago, and psychoanalysis really doesn't work, but the theory anymore, but the theory of it is still valid. That if you work for 3 hours, in the back of your mind, all of these things get excited from what you're writing about, and you go through, the next 21 hours, you wake up the next day, and there are new things there. And you start writing again, and the next day and the next. Now, if you don't write a day, it gets a little hazy, not much, but a little bit. You don't write 2 days and it gets very hazy. You don't like 3 days, and really you kind of have to start over again. Because whatever was going on in your mind, has dissipated. And so that alone, for me, writing the best time of day that's good for you. Some people it's night, some people it's morning, and to write every day for whatever period of time feels right for you.
Right, and you went to Octavia Butler, who was a colleague of yours, would write at night and do it.
She would come home at 8 o'clock from work and go to sleep, and then wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and write for however many hours, and then go to work. And she just did that. That was her daily routine. It was amazing.
So 2 final quick questions, because you've been so generous with your time. And I think that you've also said that rewriting is writing. It's when you're rewriting is where you make the story into song.
Right.
So sort of a musical metaphor. It's the dream of your story, and then you turn it into song.
Well, it's a metaphor, but it's also a reality. I mean, language is music. Language is sound. Rewriting is writing, and I completely agree with that. But there's another thing, whenever I'm writing a novel, working on a novel, at some point or another, I always read the novel out loud into a tape recorder, or some kind of recording device. And because what it sounds like is what it reads like, and sometimes when you're just reading the words, you're not listening anymore because you've read them so many times. They're not that magical first time you're reading it, or second or third. And so I think that there's literally a music, especially like in dialogue. You'll read out loud a dialogue that somebody says, and you say, well, nobody would ever say that. They wouldn't use those words. Wait a second, it's too little, it's too much, it's the wrong words. This person doesn't have that kind of education, whatever it is, you know what I mean? And so it's really fun discovering that in rewriting, and rewriting can be reading out loud.
Very last question, the pleasure of reading. You find reading a pleasure. How do you like to do it?
I do I find reading a pleasure. I think it's wonderful. I'm very cautious though about telling writers that reading and writing are very closely connected. I'm not sure of that. I mean, I use, the example, of Homer, if Homer really existed, here you have an illiterate blind man who creates the whole structure of Western literature, from poetry to novels, to history, to real history. And he spoke it. He remembered it. He spoke it. Some people are great storytellers. You hang out on a corner, you hang out, anywhere, and people are just telling these extraordinary stories. And they're not trained. They don't read books. They're just really good at storytelling. So, I read because I love reading. That may actually have impact on me the same way that my unconscious does. But I don't tell anybody what they should do as far as reading is concerned.
I just wanted to note that you've been said that you read in the tub.
I do read in the bathtub. I like water too. Also, if I'm on any boat, I used to ride the Staten Island ferry every day, and there was so much fun reading. And when I'm on or in water, reading is like the best thing for me.
And thank you so much. People can get Blood Grove tonight, read it in water, above water, whichever way. So thank you so much for your time, the great.
Well, thank you.
Mosley. We're honored. Thank you.
This is great. Thanks a lot. I will see you again, I'm sure.
You better.
Thanks again.
Well, wow. Another lit up now bookish. Wow. I'm so like, I hope that people are watching it like inspired to read and also to write, which I never feel, but I sort of want to do his thing, right?
You and me both. I mean, that was like watching a masterclass by three fantastic authors, you know?
Three fantastic authors, and this is for you for free. Yeah, absolutely. Amazing.
Exactly. I have to thank
Samantha.
you again, my friend. We will do this again. And I also want to thank Walter, and I want to thank Leslie. I want to thank Denise, and of course, all of you. Thanks for joining us. Please join us for our next episode on March 26th, when we're going to have Megan Daum, David Rose of bookshop.org, Joel Stein, and our beloved Annabelle Gurwitch. Also, I'd like to invite you to hang out March 19th for our Get Frumpy Happy Hour with our columnist Marla Jo Fisher, as well as our new series Garden Party on March 17th with Marla and our longtime gardening columnist Joshua Siskin. As always, please read our newspapers and visit our websites to stay informed and, perhaps equally important, to be entertained. If you'd like to share your thoughts for today or have any questions, please email us at events@scng.com. Have a great, safe night. Keep dry. Bye.